The storm had swallowed the entire coastline when the little girl appeared barefoot, shivering and running like something behind her wanted her dead. Cars rushed past. Thunder cracked. No one stopped. No one except the wrong person. A black SUV slowed beside her. Windows tinted, engine too quiet. The kind of vehicle you only see in stories that end badly. She didn't look at it. She kept running until a woman's scream exploded from the cliffs below. The sound cut through the rain like a knife. The girl stopped, turned, and her heart dropped down by the crashing waves. A car had skidded through the guardrail and plunged into the ocean with a woman still trapped inside. People gathered, shocked, frozen, filming with their phones instead of helping. But the little girl, the runaway, didn't hesitate. She dropped her backpack, stepped onto the slippery rocks, and dove straight into the black water without a second of fear. 9 minutes. That's how long she was underwater. 9 minutes before the crowd screamed, and a pair of small hands dragged the unconscious woman back to shore. Nobody knew who the girl was. Nobody knew where she came from. But within an hour, every crime family in the city would know her name. Because the woman she'd saved was the wife of the most feared mafia boss in the entire East Coast. And by sunset, that little runaway would become part of his family forever. Stay with me until the end, because what happened in those 9 underwater minutes turned a terrified child into the most unexpected hero the mafia had ever seen. The girl's name was Sophia. 11 years old, 4 feet 7 inches tall, weighing maybe 80 pounds, soaking wet, which she was, standing on those jagged rocks, salt water streaming from her tangled brown hair. She had been running for 3 days straight. 3 days since she escaped from the Riverside Children's Home after Mr. Harrison tried to put his hands where they didn't belong. 3 days of sleeping in bus station bathrooms and eating scraps from garbage cans behind fast food restaurants. Her thin jacket clung to her shaking body like a second skin. Her sneakers were falling apart, held together with duct tape she'd stolen from a hardware store. Everything she owned was crammed into that weathered backpack, now lying forgotten on the rocks above. But none of that mattered when she heard that scream. The luxury sedan had hydroplaned on the rain-soaked highway. Sophia watched it happen in slow motion. The expensive car spinning like a toy, smashing through the metal barrier, tumbling down the rocky slope, and plunging hood first into the churning gray ocean. The driver's door was already underwater. The passenger side tilted toward the sky at a crazy angle. Through the rear window, Sophia could see movement. Someone was alive in there. Someone was drowning above her. Maybe 20 people had gathered along the guardrail. They pointed. They shouted. They held up their phones to record the disaster. But nobody moved to help. Someone called 911. A man yelled. The fire department's 20 minutes away, another voice replied. She'll be dead by then, said a woman in a red raincoat. Sophia didn't wait to hear more. She kicked off her broken sneakers and dove. The ocean hit her like a frozen fist. The salt burned her eyes. The current tried to drag her sideways against the rocks, but Sophia had learned to swim in the city pool before her mom died, before the foster homes, before everything went wrong. She kicked hard, fighting the waves, swimming toward the sinking car. The sedan was going down fast. Water poured through the cracked windshield. The engine compartment was already completely submerged. Sophia could see the woman inside, trapped by her seat belt, pounding weakly against the passenger window. The woman had long black hair and was wearing a white blouse that billowed around her in the rising water. Her mouth was pressed against the roof of the car, gasping for the last pocket of air. Sophia reached the vehicle just as it slipped another foot deeper. She grabbed the door handle and pulled. Locked. She swam to the passenger window and pounded on the glass with her small fists. The woman's eyes met hers through the water-streaked window. They were dark brown, wide with terror, but also something else. Recognition. Sophia took the biggest breath of her life and dove under the car. The water was darker here, colder. Her lungs already burned. She felt along the bottom of the vehicle until she found a jagged piece of metal from the crash. A sharp fragment of the bumper that had torn loose when the car hit the rocks. She grabbed it and swam back to the passenger window. The woman was unconscious now. Her body floated limply in the water that had filled the car almost completely. Maybe 30 seconds of air left in the very top corner of the roof. Sophia raised the metal fragment and struck the window as hard as she could. Nothing. Again, a spiderweb of cracks appeared. Her chest felt like it was going to explode. Spots danced in front of her eyes. She needed air. She needed to surface, but if she did, the woman would die. Sophia hit the window a third time. The glass shattered inward. Water rushed into the car. But Sophia was already inside, fighting against the current, grabbing the woman around the waist. The seat belt was still fastened. Sophia's fingers fumbled with the metal buckle. It was stuck. Her vision started to fade. Her body screamed for oxygen. This was taking too long. They were both going to drown. Then the buckle clicked open. Sophia wrapped her thin arms around the unconscious woman and kicked toward the surface. But the woman was heavy, much heavier than Sophia expected, and they were deeper now. The car had continued sinking while Sophia worked to free her. 15 feet to the surface. Then 20. Sophia's legs cramped. Her arms felt like lead. The woman's dead weight dragged them both down. This was impossible. An 11-year-old girl couldn't save a grown woman from a sinking car. The physics didn't work. The strength wasn't there. But Sophia kept kicking anyway. Her head broke the surface just as her body gave out completely. She gasped, choked, went under again. The waves threw both of them against the rocks. Sophia's shoulders scraped against the barnacles, leaving a trail of blood in the water. Somehow, she found the strength to grab a piece of seaweed-covered stone. Then another. Hand over hand, she dragged herself and the woman toward the narrow strip of beach below the cliffs. People were shouting from above. Someone had climbed down and was running toward them through the surf, but Sophia barely heard any of it. She pulled the woman onto the wet sand and immediately started pushing on her chest the way she'd seen on television. Water poured from the woman's mouth. Her lips were blue. Her skin was cold as ice. "Come on," Sophia whispered, pressing harder. "Come on." Sophia tilted the woman's head back, pinched her nose, and breathed into her mouth. Then back to chest compressions. "Breathe." The woman's body jerked. She coughed violently, expelling more cedar. Her eyes fluttered open. "You're okay," Sophia said, her own voice from swallowing salt water. "You're going to be okay." The woman stared up at her with those dark brown eyes. She tried to speak, but could only whisper. "Who are you?" "Nobody," Sophia said, already looking around for her backpack. She needed to disappear before the police arrived, before the questions started, before they sent her back to another group home. But as she turned to leave, the woman's hand caught her wrist. "Wait," the woman said, stronger now. "Please, what's your name?" Sophia hesitated. She'd been using fake names for 3 days. Jennifer, Sarah, Amy, whatever seemed safe in the moment. But something in the woman's eyes made her tell the truth. "Sophia," she said quietly. "My name is Sophia." The woman smiled despite her chattering teeth. "I'm Valentina Moretti, and you just saved my life." Sophia didn't know it yet, but that name would change everything because Valentina Moretti wasn't just any woman. She was the beloved wife of Marco Moretti, the head of the most powerful crime family on the East Coast. A man who would kill anyone who threatened his wife. A man who would do anything for someone who saved her. And right now, paramedics were loading Valentina into an ambulance while Sophia tried to slip away unnoticed into the crowd. But Marco Moretti's men had already spotted her. They'd been watching from that black SUV since the moment she jumped into the water. The black SUV's engine hummed quietly as Sophia tried to disappear into the chaos. Paramedics shouted orders. Police cars arrived with flashing lights. News vans pulled up along the highway above. But the 3 men in expensive suits who stepped out of that SUV weren't watching the ambulance. They were watching her. Sophia grabbed her soggy backpack and started walking away from the beach, her bare feet slipping on the wet rocks. She kept her head down, trying to blend in with the crowd of onlookers. Just another curious kid who'd wandered down to see the accident. "Excuse me, little girl." The voice was deep, calm, and carried an accent that sounded like it came from old movies about New York. Sophia's blood turned to ice. She didn't turn around. She walked faster. "Hey kid, we just want to talk." Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. Sophia broke into a run, scrambling up the rocky slope toward the highway. Her wet clothes weighed her down. Her muscles were exhausted from the rescue, but fear gave her speed. She made it halfway up the cliff before a gentle hand touched her shoulder. "Easy there, little hero. Nobody's going to hurt you." Sophia spun around, ready to bite, scratch, or kick if she had to. Instead, she found herself looking up at a man who seemed to take up half the sky. He was maybe 50 years old, with silver hair, slicked back, and kind eyes that didn't match his intimidating size. "My name's Luca," he said, crouching down to her level. "Luca Santini. I work for Mrs. Moretti's husband. The lady you just saved. She's my boss's wife." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard whispers about families like the Morettis. The kind of people who made problems disappear, the kind who didn't forget debts, good or bad. "I didn't do anything," she whispered. Luca smiled. It wasn't a scary smile. It was the kind her grandfather might have given her, if she'd ever had a grandfather. "Kid, you just jumped into the ocean during a storm to save a woman you'd never met. That's not nothing. That's everything." Behind Luca, the other two men waited by their SUV. They looked like bodyguards from movies. Dark sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. Hands folded in front of them, patient as statues. "What do you want?" Sophia asked. "Moretti wants to meet you. To thank you properly." Sophia shook her head. "I can't. I have to go." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Where could an 11-year-old runaway go? What home was waiting for her? What family would welcome her back? Sophia's silence was answer enough. "Look," Lucas said, pulling a thick envelope from his jacket. "Moretti asked me to give you this. For what you did today." Sophia stared at the envelope. It was stuffed with money. More money than she'd ever seen in her life. Enough to buy food for months. Maybe even enough for a bus ticket to somewhere far away where nobody knew her name. But taking money from these people felt dangerous, like stepping into quicksand. "I don't want it," she said. Luca's eyebrows went up. "You don't want it. I just helped someone. That's what you're supposed to do." For a long moment, Luca studied her face. Then he stood up and tucked the envelope back into his jacket. "You know what, kid? I think Mr. Moretti is going to like you very much." Before Sophia could ask what that meant, Luca was walking back toward the SUV. Over his shoulder, he called, "Marco Moretti doesn't forget his debts, and right now, he owes you the biggest debt of his life." The three men climbed back into their vehicle and drove away, leaving Sophia standing alone on the rocky slope with questions spinning in her head. She didn't know that at that very moment, Marco Moretti was pacing the waiting room of St. Mary's Hospital like a caged tiger. She didn't know that his wife had whispered Sophia's name to him through oxygen tubes and 4 lines. She didn't know that he'd already sent his best men to find out everything there was to know about the little girl who'd risked her life for Valentina. What Sophia did know was that she was cold, hungry, and more alone than ever. She climbed the rest of the way to the highway and started walking. The rain had stopped, but dark clouds still covered the sky. Cars splashed through puddles as they passed, soaking her legs with dirty water. After an hour of walking, Sophia's strength gave out. She found a bus stop with a small covered bench and collapsed onto it, shivering. Her backpack was still damp. Her clothes clung to her skin. Her stomach cramped with hunger. She closed her eyes and tried to figure out her next move. Maybe she could hitchhike to the next town, find a truck driver who looked safe, or sneak onto a freight train like kids did in old movies. The sound of an approaching engine made her look up. Another black SUV was pulling into the bus stop, the same one from before. Sophia jumped to her feet, ready to run again. But this time, the passenger door opened and Valentina Moretti stepped out. She looked different than she had on the beach. Her black hair was dry now, pulled back in an elegant bun. She wore a long black coat over dark jeans and expensive-looking boots. But her face was still pale, and she moved carefully like someone who'd been through an ordeal. "Hello, Sophia," Valentina said softly. Sophia backed away until she hit the bus stop sign. "How did you find me?" "My husband's men are very good at finding people." Valentina took a step closer, "But I didn't come here to scare you. I came to say thank you." "Already said thank you." "Not properly." Valentina reached into her purse and pulled out a small box wrapped in silver paper. "This was my grandmother's. She gave it to me when I was about your age, and I've been waiting for the right person to pass it on to." Sophia stared at the box, but didn't take it. "I can't accept presents from strangers." Valentina smiled. "We're not strangers anymore. You saved my life. In my family, that makes us connected forever. Your family, the Moretti family." Valentina's voice carried a weight that Sophia didn't fully understand. "We take care of people who take care of us. And you, brave little Sophia, took better care of me than anyone ever has." Sophia looked past Valentina to the SUV. Through the tinted windows, she could see the silhouettes of the men inside. Waiting, watching, ready for whatever Valentina decided. I don't want to be part of any family, Sophia said. Families hurt you. They let you down. They send you away when you become inconvenient. Valentina's expression softened. Not this family. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. The places I've been. You're right. I don't know your story yet. Valentina held out the silver box again. But I know your heart. I know what you're made of, and that's enough. Sophia's hands shook as she reached for the gift. The box was heavier than it looked. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a necklace, a small golden pendant shaped like a lighthouse with a tiny diamond at the top. My grandmother told me that lighthouses guide ships safely to shore, Valentina said. Even in the worst storms, even when everything seems lost. She paused, watching Sophia's reaction. That's what you did for me today. Sophia touched the pendant with one finger. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever held. There's something else, Valentina said. My husband would like to meet you to thank you properly. Will you come with me? Sophia looked up from the necklace. What if I say no? Then Luca will drive you wherever you want to go. No questions asked. And if I say yes, Valentina smiled. Then you'll have the best meal of your life, a warm bed to sleep in, and a family that will never ever let you down. Sophia clutched the lighthouse pendant in her small fist. For the first time in 3 days, she wasn't cold anymore. Sophia climbed into the SUV, clutching the lighthouse necklace like a lifeline. The leather seats were warm and soft, nothing like the hard plastic chairs in group homes, or the cold concrete she'd been sleeping on for days. Valentina sat beside her while Luca drove through the city streets. They passed neighborhoods Sophia had never seen before, where the houses got bigger and the lawns got greener with every mile. Where are we going? Sophia asked quietly. Home, Valentina said simply. The Moretti estate sat behind tall iron gates that opened automatically as they approached. Sophia pressed her face to the window, staring at gardens that looked like something from fairy tales, fountains, stone statues, trees older than anything she'd ever seen. The house itself was enormous. 3 stories of cream-colored stone with columns like a museum. Lights glowed warmly and dozens of windows. It was the kind of place Sophia had only seen in movies about rich people. This is where you live, she whispered. Valentina nodded. Marco and I don't have children of our own. It gets quiet sometimes. The SUV stopped in front of massive wooden doors. Luca got out first, scanning the area like he expected trouble. Then he opened Valentina's door, then Sophia's. Welcome to the Moretti family home, he said with a slight bow. Sophia stepped onto marble steps that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her bare feet looked tiny against the polished stone. Her torn jeans and faded t-shirt felt even more raggedy in this setting. The front doors opened before they reached them. A woman in a black dress with gray hair pulled into a tight bun smiled at Valentina. Moretti, thank God you're safe. We've been so worried. I'm fine, Rosa. Thanks to this brave young lady. Valentina placed her hand on Sophia's shoulder. Sophia, this is Rosa. She's been taking care of this house longer than I've been alive. Rosa's eyes widened as she looked down at Sophia. This is the child who saved you. This is her. Rosa knelt down to Sophia's level, her stern expression melting into something warm. Then you are a hero, little one. And heroes are always welcome in this house. They stepped into a foyer that made Sophia's jaw drop. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with angels and clouds. A curved staircase swept upward like something from a princess movie. Paintings in golden frames covered the walls. Moretti is waiting in his study, Rosa said. But perhaps the young lady would like to freshen up first. Sophia looked down at herself. She was still damp from the ocean. Salt had dried in her hair. Her clothes smelled like seaweed and fear. That's a wonderful idea. Valentina said, Rosa, could you draw a bath and maybe find some clothes that might fit? Of course. Sophia found herself following Rosa up that incredible staircase, her hand trailing along a banister smooth as silk. They walked down a hallway lined with more paintings and photographs. Happy families, wedding pictures, moments of joy captured forever. Rosa opened a door to reveal the most beautiful bathroom Sophia had ever seen. The bathtub was the size of a small swimming pool, surrounded by white marble and gold fixtures. Fluffy towels hung from heated racks, bottles of fancy soaps and shampoos lined glass shelves. Take as long as you need, Rosa said kindly. I'll find you something clean to wear. When Rosa left, Sophia stared at herself in the enormous mirror. She looked like a drowned rat. Her brown hair hung in tangles. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her lips were still slightly blue from the cold water. But around her neck, the lighthouse pendant caught the light and sparkled like a star. She filled the bathtub with water so hot it steamed. When she sank into it, every muscle in her body sighed with relief. The warmth soaked through her skin, chasing away the last of the ocean's chill. Sophia couldn't remember the last time she'd had a real bath. The group homes had showers with lukewarm water and time limits. Before that, the foster families had made her feel like a burden for using too much hot water. She stayed in that tub until her fingers wrinkled, washing her hair 3 times with shampoo that smelled like flowers. When she finally got out, Rosa had left a pile of clothes on the counter, soft jeans that fit perfectly, a sweater the color of cream that felt like wearing a cloud, new socks, even underwear that still had tags on it. Sophia stared at the clothes. They were nicer than anything she'd ever owned. "How did you know my size?" she called through the door. "I raised 5 children," Rosa's voice came back. "You learned to guess." When Sophia emerged from the bathroom, she found Rosa waiting with a hairbrush and a kind smile. "Sit," Rosa said, gesturing to a chair by the window. "Let me fix your hair." Sophia sat very still as Rosa gently worked the tangles from her hair. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with such care. Her throat tightened with emotions she didn't want to name. "There," Rosa said finally. "Beautiful." Sophia looked in the mirror again. The transformation was incredible. She looked like a different person. Clean, cared for. Almost like she belonged in a place like this. "Now," Rosa said, "are you ready to meet Mr. Moretti?" Sophia's stomach fluttered with nerves. She'd heard stories about men like Marco Moretti, dangerous men, who solved problems with violence. But he was Valentina's husband, and Valentina had been nothing but kind. "I'm ready," Sophia said, though her voice shook slightly. They walked back downstairs and through corridors lined with artwork that probably belonged in museums. Rosa stopped in front of heavy wooden doors carved with intricate designs. She knocked softly. "Come in," said a deep voice from inside. Rosa opened the doors, and Sophia stepped into Marco Moretti's private study. The room was all dark wood and leather, filled with books from floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace. Behind a massive desk sat a man who seemed to fill the entire space with his presence. Marco Moretti was not what Sophia had expected. He was tall and broad-shouldered with salt and pepper hair and intelligent brown eyes. He wore a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie. He looked more like a college professor than a crime boss. But there was something in his eyes, a sharpness, a sense that he saw everything and forgot nothing. He stood when Sophia entered, which surprised her. Adults didn't usually stand for children. So he said, his voice carrying that same New York accent as Lucas. "You're the little hero I've been hearing about." Sophia stayed close to the door, ready to run if she needed to. "I'm not a hero." Marco smiled. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less intimidating. "Just helped someone." He walked around the desk, moving slowly so he wouldn't frighten her. "My wife tells me you dove into the ocean during a storm, that you broke a car window with your bare hands, that you dragged her to safety when she weighed twice what you do." He stopped a few feet away from Sophia. "That sounds like hero work to me." Sophia looked at her feet. Anyone would have done the same thing. "No," Marco said quietly. "They wouldn't have." 20 people stood on that cliff and watched. 20 people with phones who called for help but didn't help themselves. Only you jumped in that water. He gestured to a leather chair in front of his desk. "Please sit. We have things to discuss." Sophia perched on the edge of the chair, still ready to bolt. Marco sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Tell me about yourself, Sophia. What's your story?" Sophia's jaw tightened. "Why does it matter?" "Because my wife is alive because of you. That makes you family. And family looks out for each other. I don't have a family. You do now." The words hung in the air between them. Sophia studied Marco's face, looking for lies or tricks. But his expression was serious, sincere. "I don't understand," she said finally. Marco leaned back in his chair. "In my world, there are rules, codes of honor that go back generations. One of the most important rules is this: you never forget a debt. And right now, I owe you a debt I can never repay." "I don't want money," Sophia said quickly. "I know. Valentina told me you refused the envelope." Marco's eyes crinkled with amusement. That tells me more about your character than anything else could. He stood and walked to a bookshelf, pulling down a leather-bound photo album. He opened it and showed Sophia the first page. It was a wedding picture. Marco in a black tuxedo, looking young and nervous. Valentina in a white dress, radiant with joy. "We've been married 23 years, Marco said softly. "She's been the light of my life since the day we met." Without her, he trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia looked at the picture, then up at Marco. For the first time, she saw past the intimidating exterior to the man underneath. A man who loved his wife more than anything in the world. "The doctor said she was underwater for 9 minutes, Marco continued. "They said brain damage was almost certain after that long. But she's perfect, completely fine because you got to her in time." He closed the album and looked directly at Sophia. "You gave me back the most important thing in my world. How do I repay that?" Sophia shifted uncomfortably. "You don't have to repay anything." "Yes, I do. It's who I am." Marco returned to his chair. "So, I'm going to ask you again, and I want the truth this time. What's your story, Sophia? Where do you come from? Where are your parents?" Sophia's hands clenched into fists in her lap. She'd been asked these questions 100 times by social workers, police officers, foster parents, but something about Marco's tone made her want to answer honestly. "My mom died when I was 7, she said quietly. "Cancer. I never knew my dad. After that, it was foster homes and group homes, and people who said they cared but didn't really." Marco's expression darkened. "Someone hurt you?" It wasn't a question. Sophia nodded, not trusting her voice. "The last place was the worst. The man who ran it." Sophia swallowed hard. "He had wandering hands, so I ran away 3 days ago." Marco's hands slowly curled into fists. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "What was this man's name?" Sophia looked up, startled by the change in his tone. Marco's eyes had gone cold as winter. This was the dangerous man she'd heard about in whispers. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said quickly. "What was his name?" "Harrison. His name was Harrison." Marco nodded once, filing the information away. Sophia had the feeling that Harrison's life had just become very complicated. "You said you've been on your own for 3 days." Marco said, his voice gentling again. "Where have you been sleeping? What have you been eating?" Sophia told him about the bus stations, the garbage cans, the cold nights under bridges. Marco listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with every detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That ends now," he said finally. "What do you mean?" Marco stood and walked to the window that looked out over his estate's gardens. "I mean, you're not going back to any group home. You're not sleeping in bus stations or eating from garbage cans. You're staying here." Sophia's heart jumped. "I can't do that. I'm nobody. I don't belong in a place like this." Marco turned back to her. "You saved my wife's life. That makes you somebody. And Moretti family takes care of each other. But what about the authorities? They'll be looking for me." Marco's smile was not entirely pleasant. "Let me worry about the authorities." Sophia stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. A home, a family, safety. It seemed too good to be true. In her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. She whispered, "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Sophia looked into Marco Moretti's eyes and saw something she'd never seen before in an adult. Complete sincerity. No hidden agenda. No lies waiting behind kind words. "Because you're not a stranger," Marco said simply. "Not anymore. You risked everything to save someone you'd never met. That tells me who you are inside, and that's the kind of person I want in my family." He walked back to his desk and picked up a framed photo. It showed him and Valentina at some kind of family gathering, surrounded by dozens of people laughing and embracing. "This is what family looks like in my world," he said. "Loyalty, protection, love that doesn't come with conditions." He set the photo down and looked at Sophia. "I'm offering you something that can never be taken away. A place where you belong. People who will fight for you. A home." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She'd been holding back for years. "What if I disappoint you? What if I'm not worth saving?" Marco knelt down in front of her chair, bringing himself to her. "Eye level. Listen to me very carefully, Sophia. You dove into a freezing ocean to save a complete stranger. You stayed underwater for 9 minutes when your body was screaming for air. You performed CPR on someone twice your size until she breathed again." His voice grew fierce with conviction. "You are worth everything." Sophia looked at this powerful man kneeling before her, offering her the one thing she'd given up hoping for. A real family, a real home, a chance to be more than just a survivor. She thought about the lighthouse pendant around her neck, about guiding ships safely to shore through the worst storms. Maybe it was time to let someone guide her home, too. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Marco Moretti smiled and pulled the brave little girl who'd saved his wife into the first real hug she'd had in 4 years. And that's how a runaway child became the most protected person in the Moretti crime family overnight. Sometimes the most unexpected heroes find the most unexpected homes. 3 months had passed since that stormy night that changed everything. Sophia woke in her new bedroom, sunlight streaming through silk curtains onto walls painted the soft lavender she had chosen herself. The nightmares still came sometimes, dreams of drowning cars and wandering hands, but they were fewer now. When they did visit, Rosa was always there with warm milk and gentle words, or Valentina would sit beside her bed until sleep returned peacefully. The lighthouse pendant never left her throat. It had become her anchor, a reminder that she had guided someone to safety and found her own safe harbor in return. This morning felt different, though. Today was her first day at Riverside Academy, the elite private school where Marco had enrolled her. Sophia had argued against it at first, insisting she could learn just fine with tutors at home, but Valentina had been firm. You need friends your own age, she had said. You need to learn how to be a normal child again. Normal. Sophia wasn't sure she remembered what that meant anymore. She dressed carefully in her new uniform, navy blazer with the academy crest, crisp white blouse, plaid skirt that fell just below her knees. Everything fit perfectly, thanks to Rose's keen eye and multiple shopping trips. Looking in the mirror, Sophia barely recognized the girl who had jumped into the ocean 3 months ago. This girl looked like she belonged in magazines, like she had never known hunger or fear. But appearances could be deceiving. Rosa appeared in the doorway with a breakfast tray. You need to eat something before school, little one. I'm too nervous to eat. That's exactly when you need to eat most. Rosa set the tray on the desk by the window. Your brain needs fuel to handle whatever today brings. Sophia managed half a piece of toast and some orange juice before her stomach rebelled. Rosa didn't push, just wrapped the remaining food in a napkin and tucked it into Sophia's new leather backpack. For later, she said with a knowing smile. Marco was waiting in the foyer when Sophia came downstairs, looking every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit. He had taught her the story they would tell if anyone asked too many questions. She was his ward, the daughter of a deceased business partner who had come to live with them after a family tragedy. Close enough to the truth to be believable, vague enough to discourage further inquiry. Ready for this, princess? The nickname had started as a joke, something about her living in a mansion like royalty now, but it had stuck. Sophia found she didn't mind it. In fact, she loved the way Marco's voice softened when he said it, the way it made her feel precious and protected. As ready as I'll ever be. They climbed into the black sedan, not the SUV that might attract unwanted attention at the school. Luca drove while Marco reviewed some business documents, but Sophia knew he was really watching her from the corner of his eye, ready to call off the whole thing if she showed any signs of panic. The academy was everything Sophia had expected from her research. Ivy-covered brick buildings, manicured lawns, students who moved with the casual confidence that came from never worrying about where their next meal would come from. As they pulled through the gates, Sophia felt the familiar flutter of not belonging anywhere, of being an imposter in clothes that cost more than some families spent on food in a month. Remember, Marco said quietly as Lucas stopped at the main entrance, you have every right to be here. You're as good as any of them, better than most. Sophia nodded, straightening her shoulders. She had survived things these privileged children couldn't imagine. She could handle a day of classes and teenage politics. I'll pick you up at 3, Marco said, kissing the top of her head. Call if you need anything before then. Sophia walked through the heavy wooden doors into a world that smelled like old money and fresh flowers. Students moved through the halls in clusters, their voices echoing off vaulted ceilings. She found her way to the main office, where a kind-faced woman checked her schedule and assigned a student guide. This is Madison Chun, the secretary said as a petite girl with silky black hair and intelligent eyes approached. Madison, this is Sophia Moretti, our new student. Welcome to Riverside, Madison said with a genuine smile. I know it can be overwhelming at first, but you'll get the hang of it quickly. They walked through corridors lined with portraits of distinguished alumni, past classrooms where teachers in tweed jackets discussed literature and history with the casual authority of people who had attended similar schools themselves. Madison kept up a steady stream of commentary, pointing out important locations and warning Sophia about teachers who were sticklers for punctuation or homework deadlines. Your first class is European history with Mrs. Patterson, Madison said as they stopped outside a classroom door. She's tough, but fair. After that you have me for chemistry, so we can sit together. Thank you, Sophia said, surprised by how grateful she felt for this small kindness. European history proved to be exactly what Sophia expected. Mrs. Patterson was a severe woman in her 60s who clearly believed that knowledge was something to be earned through suffering. She assigned Sophia a seat in the third row and handed her a thick textbook without ceremony. We're discussing the rise of organized crime families in early 20th century America, Mrs. Patterson announced as she began writing names on the blackboard. Can anyone tell me why these organizations were able to gain such power and influence? Sophia's stomach dropped. Of all the topics they could be covering on her first day, it had to be this one. She kept her eyes fixed on her desk, hoping to remain invisible, but Mrs. Patterson had other ideas. Miss Moretti, she said sharply, perhaps you have some insights on this topic. Every eye in the room turned to Sophia. She could feel her cheeks burning, her palms growing damp. The name Moretti hung in the air like an accusation, and she wondered if anyone recognized it, if they knew what kind of family had taken her in. I think, Sophia said carefully, measuring each word, that they gained power by providing services the government couldn't or wouldn't provide. Protection, justice, family loyalty in a world where those things were rare. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose slightly. An interesting perspective. Can you elaborate? Sophia took a breath, drawing on conversations she had overheard between Marco and his associates, careful to speak academically rather than personally. These families operated by codes of honor that went back centuries. They protected their communities when the police wouldn't or couldn't. People trusted them because they kept their word and took care of their own. And what about the violence? Asked a boy in the front row. The murders and extortion. Every system has its dark side, Sophia replied, surprising herself with her steady voice. The question is whether the protection and loyalty they offered outweighed the costs. Mrs. Patterson nodded approvingly. Excellent analysis, Miss Moretti. You clearly have a sophisticated understanding of complex social dynamics. The rest of the class passed in a blur of note-taking and discussion, but Sophia could feel curious glances from her classmates. She had marked herself as someone to pay attention to, someone who thought about things differently than they did. Chemistry with Madison was a relief. They worked together on a lab experiment involving chemical reactions, and Madison proved to be not only smart but funny, making quiet jokes about their teacher's tendency to set things on fire accidentally. So what's your story? Madison asked as they measured solutions. Your family just moved here. Something like that, Sophia said, sticking to the script Marco had prepared. My parents died in an accident, and Marco Moretti took me in. He was my father's business partner. That must have been really hard. It was, Sophia said, appreciating that Madison didn't push for details. But the Morettis have been wonderful to me. Lunch was the real test. The cafeteria was a maze of unspoken social hierarchies, with tables clearly designated for different groups. Madison led Sophia to a table near the windows where several other students were already seated. Everyone, this is Sophia Moretti, Madison announced. She's new. The introductions flowed around the table. There was James, a quiet boy who wrote for the school newspaper, Elena, who was student body treasurer, David, who played violin in the orchestra, and Sarah, who captained the debate team. They seemed genuinely nice, asking normal questions about where she had lived before and what subjects she liked best. It was almost easy to pretend she was just another privileged teenager, until Elena mentioned something about a charity fundraiser the school was organizing. We're raising money for children who've aged out of the foster care system, Elena explained. It's such a problem. These kids who turn 18 and suddenly have nowhere to go. Sophia's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Images flashed through her mind of older kids at the group homes who had disappeared on their 18th birthdays, of the terror she had felt imagining that future for herself. That sounds like an important cause, she managed to say. You should totally join the committee, Sarah said. We need people who really understand social issues, and you clearly do after your comments in history class today. I'll think about it, Sophia said, though her throat felt tight. The rest of lunch passed without incident, but Sophia felt the weight of maintaining her facade. Every casual reference to family vacations and private tutors and country club memberships reminded her how different her life had been just a few months ago. She was grateful when the bell rang, and she could lose herself in the familiar challenges of mathematics and literature. Her last class of the day was art, which turned out to be exactly what she needed. The teacher, a young woman named Miss Rodriguez, encouraged experimentation and personal expression in ways that reminded Sophia of better times, of the few foster families who had noticed her talent and encouraged her to draw. Today we're working on self-portraits, Miss Rodriguez announced. But I want you to think beyond just capturing your physical appearance. Try to show who you are inside, what makes you unique. Sophia stared at the blank paper for a long moment, then began to sketch. Her pencil moved almost without conscious direction, creating not just her face, but layers of meaning beneath it. There was the girl who had lived in fear, the child who had jumped into dark water without hesitation, the young woman who was learning to trust again. She used light and shadow to show the complexity of her journey, the lighthouse pendant rendered in careful detail at the center of it all. That's extraordinary, Miss Rodriguez said quietly, stopping beside Sophia's desk. You have real talent. Thank you, Sophia said, studying her work. For the first time all day, she felt like herself rather than playing a role. When the final bell rang, Sophia gathered her things and made her way to the main entrance where Marco's sedan was waiting. She slid into the back seat, exhausted from the effort of being constantly on guard. How was it? Marco asked, studying her face in the rearview mirror. Complicated, Sophia said honestly. But not terrible. That's a good start. These things take time. They drove home in comfortable silence, Sophia watching the familiar landmarks that had become her new normal. The mansion appeared through the gates like something from a fairy tale, and she felt the same sense of wonder she had experienced that first night. This was home now, really home, not just a place she was staying until something better came along. Valentina was waiting in the foyer with Rosa, both women clearly anxious to hear about her first day. Sophia found herself smiling as she described her classes, her teachers, the students who had been kind to her. It felt good to have people who cared enough to ask, who listened to her answers with genuine interest. Did you make any friends? Valentina asked as they sat down to dinner in the smaller dining room they used for family meals. Maybe, Sophia said, thinking of Madison's easy kindness. There's a girl named Madison who seems really nice. And some others who invited me to join a committee. That's wonderful, Rosa said, beaming with pride. I knew they would love you once they got to know you. Sophia wasn't sure it was that simple, but she appreciated the confidence. As they ate Rosa's homemade pasta and talked about ordinary things like homework assignments and weekend plans, she felt something inside her relax. This was what normal felt like, she realized. This was what she had been missing without even knowing it. After dinner, she helped Rosa clear the dishes and then retreated to her room to work on homework. The assignments were challenging but not impossible, and she found herself enjoying the mental stimulation after months of focusing primarily on healing and adjustment. As she worked through algebra problems and read chapters about the American Revolution, she felt her mind stretching and growing in ways it hadn't in years. A soft knock on her door interrupted her concentration. Come in, she called, and Marco appeared with 2 cups of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. Rosa thought you might need some brain fuel, he said, setting 1 cup on her desk. Thank you, Sophia said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Marco, can I ask you something? Of course. That discussion in history class today, about crime families and codes of honor. Some of the things I said, they came from listening to you and your associates talking. Was it okay that I used that knowledge? Marco was quiet for a moment, considering. You spoke academically about historical patterns, not about specific people or current situations. That shows good judgment. But people might start making connections. About your family, about me being here. Let them wonder, Marco said firmly. You have every right to be knowledgeable about history, about social structures, about how the world really works. Don't ever apologize for being smart. Sophia nodded, feeling some of her anxiety ease. Sometimes I feel like I'm living 2 lives. The girl at school who has a normal family and normal problems, and the girl who knows what it feels like to have nothing. That's not two different girls, princess. That's one girl who has lived through more than most people ever will. Your experiences, both the hard ones and the good ones, they make you who you are. Don't try to hide from them. After Marco left, Sophia returned to her homework with a clearer mind. She was still working when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hey Sophia, it's Madison from school. Got your number from the student directory. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say welcome again and let you know if you want to sit with us again tomorrow, you're totally welcome. Sophia stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Thank you. That means a lot. See you tomorrow. As she got ready for bed, Sophia thought about how much her life had changed in such a short time. 3 months ago, she had been sleeping in bus stations and eating from garbage cans. Now she was worried about algebra homework and whether she had made a good impression on her classmates. The transformation was so complete it sometimes felt like those desperate days had happened to someone else. But lying in her comfortable bed with the lighthouse pendant warm against her skin, Sophia knew she would never forget where she had come from. The fear and hunger and loneliness were part of her now, woven into the fabric of who she was becoming. They made her grateful for every warm meal, every kind word, every moment of safety. They also made her strong. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that began to feel natural. School days filled with classes and gradually expanding friendships. Evenings with Marco and Valentina that felt more like family dinners than anything Sophia had ever experienced. Weekends exploring the city or working in the garden with Rosa. She joined the committee Elena had mentioned, throwing herself into fundraising for aged-out foster children with an intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. Her personal understanding of the issues involved made her contributions invaluable, and soon she was leading subcommittees and presenting ideas to the school administration. It was during one of these committee meetings that Sophia first noticed the black car parked across from the school entrance. Nothing unusual about that. Expensive cars were common in this neighborhood, but something about the way it sat there day after day, the way the windows never rolled down, made her uneasy. She mentioned it to Luca when he picked her up that Friday afternoon. Probably nothing, he said, but his eyes found the car in his rearview mirror and stayed there. His hand moved casually to the inside of his jacket, a gesture Sophia had learned meant he was checking his weapon. When they arrived home, Luca walked her to the door instead of just dropping her off, his movements controlled and alert. Sophia felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in her chest, the reminder that despite all the normalcy she had built around herself, danger was never far away. Marco was in his study with 2 men Sophia didn't recognize, their voices low and serious. Valentina appeared in the hallway, her smile bright, but her eyes worried. How was school today, sweetheart? Fine, Sophia said, but she could hear the tension in her own voice. Valentina, is everything okay? Of course, Valentina said, but she guided Sophia quickly toward the kitchen where Rosa was preparing dinner. Just some business matters your father is handling. Father. The word still sent a warm shock through Sophia's system every time Valentina used it. Marco had never asked her to call him that, never pushed for anything more than she was ready to give, but somehow the family had begun referring to him that way when talking to her, and she found she didn't mind. She was helping Rosa set the table when she heard raised voices from the study, followed by the sound of the front door slamming. Through the dining room windows, she watched the 2 strangers get into a dark sedan and drive away quickly. Marco appeared in the kitchen a few minutes later, his jaw tight, but his expression carefully controlled. Change of plans for tonight, he said. We're having a family dinner in the safe room. The safe room was something Sophia had been shown on her second day in the house, but had never actually used. Hidden behind a bookshelf in Marco's study, it was equipped with everything needed to wait out trouble, communications equipment, emergency supplies, comfortable seating for extended stays. As they made their way downstairs with plates of Rosa's lasagna, Sophia felt her carefully constructed normal world tilting sideways. Marco, she said quietly as they settled around the small table in the reinforced room. What's happening? Marco exchanged a look with Valentina, some silent communication passing between them. Then he turned to Sophia with the same serious expression he wore during important business discussions. There are some people who aren't happy about you being part of our family, princess. People who think they can use you to get to me. Sophia's blood ran cold. Because I saved Valentina. Because you matter to us now, Marco corrected. Because hurting you would hurt us, and there are people in this world who would see that as an opportunity. The Castellano family, Valentina said quietly. They've been our rivals for years, and they see you as a weakness they can exploit. Sophia set down her fork, her appetite disappearing. So I'm putting you in danger just by being here. No, Marco said firmly. Your family. Family protects each other. That's what we do. But if I wasn't here, if I just left, you wouldn't have to worry about this. The silence that followed was deafening. Rosa reached over and took Sophia's hand, her weathered fingers gentle but firm. Little one, she said, her voice carrying decades of wisdom. Running away doesn't solve problems. It just moves them somewhere else. Besides, Valentina added with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, where would you go? This is your home now. Marco leaned forward, his expression intense. Listen to me very carefully, Sophia. You are not responsible for other people's choices to do evil things. You are not a burden or a weakness. You are my daughter in every way that matters, and I will die before I let anyone hurt you. The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. She had been waiting for months for them to realize she was too much trouble, to decide that saving her had been a mistake. Instead, here was Marco talking about dying to protect her. I don't want you to die, she whispered. Then we'll make sure it doesn't come to that, Marco said. But first, you need to understand what we're dealing with. He pulled out a tablet and showed her photos of several men, their faces hard and unfamiliar. The Castellano family has been trying to move into our territory for years, he explained. They see our protection of you as a sign of weakness, something they can exploit. They're wrong, but that won't stop them from trying. What do they want? To kidnap you and use you as leverage. They think if they have you, they can force me to give up control of my territory, my businesses. Over my dead body, Sophia said, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. Marco smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him all evening. That's my girl. They spent the rest of the evening planning. Starting Monday, Sophia would have additional security at school, bodyguards disguised as maintenance workers, and substitute teachers. Her schedule would vary randomly to make her movements harder to predict. Most importantly, she would wear a tracking device and carry a panic button at all times. It felt like stepping backward into fear and paranoia, but Sophia found herself oddly calm about it. She had lived through worse than this. She had survived being completely alone and defenseless. Now she had a family willing to fight for her, resources and protection she had never imagined possible. As they finally made their way back upstairs to the main house, Sophia caught Marco's arm. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not sending me away. For not deciding I was too much trouble. Marco stopped in the middle of the hallway and pulled her into one of his fierce hugs. Never, he said into her hair. You're stuck with us now, princess. For better or worse, through whatever comes. That night, lying in her bed with extra guards posted outside her window, Sophia touched the lighthouse pendant and thought about storms. She had guided one ship to safety and found her own safe harbor, but apparently the ocean was still full of dangerous waters. The difference now was that she wasn't navigating alone anymore. She had a family, a real family that would weather any storm to keep her safe. And if anyone thought they could use her to hurt the people she loved, they were about to learn just how strong a lighthouse could be when it decided to fight back.